are going to get started in just a minute. We'll give everybody 1 minute to join. Usually we have people kind of trickling in for the first couple minutes after the top of the hour. But I'm really excited to be here today with Ashley from TV Scientific and Patrick from Rockerbox. We're going to do introductions once we get started, but I guess a fun icebreaker while we wait. Patrick, what did we do at the last webinar? I feel like we did like, what's your favorite holiday like gift or something like that?
Money. That would be mine this year. Yeah, I think, coming in the holidays, a lot of holiday trivia. Or like maybe it was something like favorite fall movie or something like as we get into Halloween time. Yeah, that's at least what's on my mind recently. I've been making my list as the weather starts to change here.
Well, then what is your favorite like holiday?
Ooh, it is actually Halloween, I will say. As an enjoyer of a holiday, Halloween. Shopping, of course, I guess Black Friday, Cyber Monday. That's the best time of the year, but yeah, just family time, hanging out. It's gonna be October, I think.
Yeah, well, and Prime Day is coming up. What is that? October 8th and 9th this year. So we're
so
Ashley,
early.
what about
you? Ooh, my favorite holiday, it's definitely Christmas, December, all of that. Yeah. I love the heat up. I love the decorating. My birthday is also in there, so I get it all. Yeah.
Nice. Me too, but I will say that growing up, I did not appreciate having a birthday close to Christmas because I always felt like the extended family always treated it as a
afterthought. Is it close enough? Is it close enough where like you got a separate batch of gifts from Christmas, or was it like, hey, we're gonna get you on Christmas?
I'm 2 weeks before, so it was hit or miss.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm a little less than a week, and my mom always went like above and beyond so that they didn't get confused. But I'm like a little spoiled about it, I'd say.
You're like super close. Oh, awesome. Well, if you all want to drop in the comments and tell us what your favorite holiday is, we'd love to know. Okay, well, we can go ahead and get started. I think some more people will trickle in as we go, but without further ado, we can go through some quick introductions. I'm Ashley McAlpin. I'm our head of marketing here at Rockerbox. I'm going to be moderating this conversation between Patrick and Ashley, and I'm also going to be sharing some trends that we found in a trend report that we worked on with the TV Scientific team. So I'm really excited to tell you about that. But before I do, Patrick, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ashley. My name's Patrick. I'm a CSM here at Rockerbox. I've been here just about 2 years now, and it's been really great. I actually came over from, I was a customer previously, and now my manager is my former CSM, and it's been a really great learning experience, cool way to sort of survey the space, and also sort of have like a little bit of like a broader gaze onto what other companies are doing in their marketing orgs.
Awesome. And Ashley?
Yes, thanks, Ashley. I am Ashley Parducci, head of customer insights and measurement at TV Scientific. Been here for over 3 years with a long background in performance marketing. So excited to be here today.
Awesome. All right. So kind of to set the stage for the conversation, this is going to be a panel webinar like usual. If you're used to Rockerbox panel webinars, don't worry, I'm not going to run through a million slides, but I am going to kind of set the stage. And I want to tell you a little bit about a project that the Rockerbox team worked on with the TV Scientific team. So we're going to be referencing this holiday trend report pretty frequently throughout this webinar. And don't worry, if you didn't see it in the emails for the invites for this event, we're going to also be sending the trend report in the follow-up email as well. So you will have access to that report and all of these statistics and kind of all of the data that we gathered. But I think kind of taking some time and going through some of the big takeaways from the report is a great way to kind of set the stage for the conversation. So we surveyed nearly 600 marketers to understand how they're approaching the holiday season. And the findings were, I wouldn't say like crazy. It wasn't anything that we were like, oh my gosh, we didn't see this coming. But it is really interesting to take some time and really think about, like, how are your peers thinking about the holiday season this year, and what are some of the trends that we're seeing? So the first thing is that competition is very fierce. 54% of the marketers that we surveyed are worried about competing with e-commerce giants, and 52% of marketers are worried about the big box retailers. So there is a lot of competition in the space. There's a lot happening on the e-commerce side and also on the retail side. And it's something that marketers are thinking a lot about, and that's putting the pressure on, right? 60% of those marketers are feeling more pressure to show ROI this holiday season than they did before. And 56% of marketers are concerned about consumer spending, which I think is reasonable, right? There's a lot happening right now. And it also has resulted in these goals that are multifaceted. 70% of marketers agree that both brand awareness and increased sales are important for their holiday strategies. And then timing is everything. We're going to talk about this in a second with our first question, but 25% of marketers began planning for the holiday season in Q1 of this year, and some even earlier, which is kind of wild to me, right? That's a quarter of you were thinking about this time of year 9 months ago, which is wild. And kind of adding this other layer to the conversation. Obviously, we're joined by Ashley. She's with TV Scientific. CTV is going to have a heavy theme in this conversation. And that's because it ranks one of the most effective in the holiday lineup. So marketers invested 2.6 times more in CTV during Black Friday, Cyber Monday last year, which resulted in 92% increase in app installs, 67% increase in purchase rates, and 19% decrease in cost per action. So CTV has a really important role here, and Ashley's going to kind of speak to that, I think, throughout in a lot of her answers as well. Okay, so all that being said, that leads us kind of to this first question, and we're gonna get into this conversation where Ashley and Patrick are gonna kind of share their perspectives here. But from the trend report, before we jump into the first question, I want to kind of set the stage for this when we're talking about timing. I already mentioned that 25% of marketers began planning in Q1 for the holiday season, but that's actually up from 15% last year. So it's not like 25% is not the average. Last year, only 15% of marketers were thinking about or planning for the holiday season in Q1. Some different factors that kind of came to light in the trend report. It's an election year. Amazon Prime Day is in October. There's also this like highly competitive e-commerce landscape that resulted in that 54% of marketers that are activating these campaigns earlier. So all of that being said, Ashley, I'd love to pass it to you first. Like, why are marketers starting their campaigns earlier this year?
Yeah, Ashley, I think, some of what you touched on is part of it. So the fact that there's a lot of uncertainty in market conditions between the election, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, they're actually really late this year. So they're almost encroaching on that last minute shipping date. So marketers at this point know that what they did last year did work, and we're seeing bigger budgets, but they know that they may need a longer runway in order to have the same, or, in what everyone wants is better performance than last year. So really need to build that frequency throughout the holiday season. And they know that they have different types of shoppers. So there are the really early shoppers that have already started the purchasing of gifts. And you have those last minute shoppers that you are reaching with those last deals.
Yeah, those are good points. Patrick, what about you?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think, like, generally speaking, I personally think it's because marketers are also commonly really savvy consumers themselves, and they usually recognize kind of like what's happening in the broader landscape. When they leave the house, like, they see the advertising starting earlier, they see the messaging sort of getting out in front of things as well. So I think they can kind of like read the room, so to say. But more practically, there's probably like 3 reasons I think about here. The first would be just to mitigate that competitive pressure that y'all were just talking about, like getting out in front of the wave of, I guess, what you would call maybe like on schedule seasonal advertising. It just helps because people with bigger budgets, bigger like market share, bigger reach, things like that, those big box retailers, the e-commerce giants, like it's really hard to compete there if you're maybe like a younger growing company. And so just getting out in front of it is going to help you avoid some of that competitive pressure and sort of getting crowded out. Other thing that comes to mind is like creating a longer runway to prime your customers with like more creative and like maybe tactical storytelling as well. I think in talking with a lot of our customers, for many businesses, holidays, not just like, oh, a great sales boost for us every year that we can sort of count on, but it's often like a make or break moment for their annual forecast as well. And that's like a luxury, like the big e-commerce or like the big box retails, like they don't rely on it for that way. It's not like they're going to go out of business if they like miss their forecast, right? Like they definitely don't want to, but it can be a lot more impactful for like a smaller or growing company. And since you don't want to leave that much up to chance, I think getting a head start is just, an understandable priority for them. You only really get one shot there, so you don't really want to rush it. You want to give yourself sort of as long as a leash as possible. And then finally, like maybe just like more practically, I think it helps front load your learnings and like working out any sort of bugs you have in your like go-to-market motion as well. It's probably better to identify like a weak point or like area of improvement in your marketing in like October 3rd than it is, and the day before Black Friday. Maybe from experience I'm speaking now, but yeah. But yeah, I think just it's always a good practice to get out ahead of things, I think.
Yeah, no, those are great. And it is interesting to kind of contrast some emerging, I wouldn't necessarily say smaller brands, but like emerging brands with some of the giants or like the wholesale retailers, like the really big organizations. Because you're right, there's a total contrast in the way that holiday performance impacts their budget for next year, their planning for next year. Kind of all of these things are kind of contingent on performance. And your point on like marketers being really like savvy is, I think that's totally true, right? And I think how many times have we seen, and sometimes I think like the bigger retailers or some of the like the wholesale players kind of play into this too. Like the sooner they get into the holiday, like the sooner everybody else is jumping on the holiday. And I do think it's kind of being aware of your surroundings and being like, oh, okay, all of the Christmas stuff is out in September. Like we should be thinking about Christmas. Like we need to be getting on top of our game. And so I do think that we've seen that trend get earlier and earlier, which is interesting as well. All right. So moving on to the next question. And for everybody in the audience, if you guys have questions as we go or things that you want to kind of, you want Ashley or Patrick to push a little bit deeper into, drop them in the comments here on the side in the chat. And we'd love to kind of answer those as we go. We will have a section for questions at the end, but we like to keep this interactive. So feel free to join the conversation in the chat. So moving into the next question, we're going to be talking about this like concept of competition. And I wanted to add a little bit of context from the trend report as well. Retail competition is intense, right? We already talked about this. We talked about the 54% of marketers that are worried about competing with these e-commerce giants, and 52% are worried about the big box retailers. And I think, Patrick, what you were saying really spoke to this, right? But I think marketers are also spending significantly more during key periods like Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and they're increasing their investment. In fact, we found that most marketers were increasing that investment by 2.6 times, which is really crazy if you think about it. And then during Black Friday, Cyber Monday, like I said, the app installs are up. We're seeing the purchase rates increase. We're seeing the cost per action drop. Like we're seeing all of these indicators that speak to this like concept of heightened competition. So given that, and given kind of the changing market conditions with everything that's coming down the line towards the end of this year, what are some key considerations that brands should be taking into account right now for their holiday campaigns in 2024? And Patrick, we can go ahead and start with you on this one.
Yeah, I think when I think about sort of like the heightened competition, also the pressure, I think sort of the best way to win that is probably just to stand out the best in market. So I think I'd probably say first would be like nailing your creative messaging and brand positioning. It sounds really fundamental, but I think like the market's going to be really crowded. And so nailing that is going to be like really foundational to winning. And that sort of goes back to like, if you're going to be starting everything so early, that includes like creating and producing what you're actually going to be running, like the assets in the fall, right? Like that sort of thing. You have to like cast people to be in your commercial and like book shoots and things like that. Like that's happening in Q1 for sure. And so making sure you're getting like your brand story right, I think is like a simple, but really like that's sort of like the bread and butter of like winning over a customer and creating some sort of connection there. In fact, I think that like lends itself pretty well to CTV specifically too, which I guess we'll get into in a little bit more deeply. But like when I think about going into holidays, and we mentioned sort of at the beginning of this webinar, like into the fall, like people are going to be sitting around the TV or whatever it might be watching like a bunch of stuff. Like it's holiday movies, it's football games, it's things like that. And I think the CTV ads are going to be like right there alongside that content the whole time. So, things like seeing commercials with people from their favorite shows is going to be something that really hooks people and sort of like starts to create that association early on before they go ahead and like start to try to make purchase decisions later on. And then finally, another like, I guess I'd say simple one, but just having a really clear and competitive like value prop and promotional offer. We've sort of made the point already that like it's going to be really competitive here, like when you actually get to Black Friday, Cyber Monday sort of period. And so it's pretty unavoidable. You're probably going to have to offer some sort of sweetener, promo discount, whatever it might be. But I think if you do that sort of like early bird anticipatory marketing really well, then as long as you hit on that promotional offer, you can probably capitalize really successfully on those offers once people actually finally resolve to say like, okay, time to make a purchase.
Yeah. Ashley, what about you?
Yeah, I'll echo what Patrick said to start. The creative messaging is absolutely important. What's the story you're telling throughout the holiday season, and how is that working with other channels? So what does that look like across CTV, across search, across social? And is it a harmonious story? I will echo the deal piece. So we know, given market conditions, that people are looking for deals. So if you can get that out there and encourage the earlier purchase, for example, make sure the brand awareness is there, you're setting yourself up for success within the competition. I do think it's hard for the smaller brands to stand out. And that's actually why I think CTV is a really important part of your marketing mix as you go into the holiday season and beyond. You can see a brand that's smaller, newer, it's on search and social, you have influencers promoting it, but do you have the brand trust yet? And I believe that brand trust does happen by being on the glass screen. It's on the content you're watching. You're right. The viewership changes throughout the holidays. We're going to more specific content. A lot of the streaming services have Christmas shows all day. They have all of the horror shows for Halloween. So it's all of the seasons that we're coming into. So really just finding the incremental reach in CTV is an important part of your holiday consideration. And on top of that, make sure you're reaching the audience that's purchasing. The audience that's purchasing a gift during your holiday campaigns is not necessarily the audience that is buying your product throughout the rest of the year. So I don't know that your competition is thinking through that. Where are those users on CTV? And definitely work with your CTV provider to talk through that. Where do I find this type of user? This is who typically buys via holiday. So those would be where I'd start. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great call out. And I think we'll talk about this a little bit more in one of the later questions, but like, remembering that the purchaser is different during the holidays than the rest of the year is so important, and something that I think is really easy to neglect, especially as you're like recapping the holiday season or you're looking at holiday performance from years past. Like you have to make sure that you're taking that into consideration as you're planning for Q1 and Q2 and kind of going into next year as well, that your buyers during Q4 are probably a little bit different than your buyers outside of the holiday season, or your buyers in Q2 if you're like a new year kind of holiday company in the health and wellness industry. So great point. Okay, moving on to the next question, we're going to talk about balancing brand awareness and driving direct sales, which I think is kind of on top of everyone's mind right now, especially when we're kind of in this like interesting place from an economic perspective. So from the trend report, we found that 70% of marketers agree that balancing brand awareness with direct sales is critical to holiday campaign success. And 65% of marketers use CTV to achieve both brand awareness and performance goals, which I know that Ashley is going to push into even further. But what we found is that building brand recognition early in the season can boost long-term sales performance throughout the holidays, especially during the high traffic, like heavy up periods like Black Friday, Cyber Monday. So with all of that being said, Ashley, in a high pressure season, how can marketers effectively balance the dual goals of building brand awareness and driving direct sales?
I think this is one of my favorite questions, Ashley. I was asked a very similar question the other day. A marketer asked me, we're very performance forward at TV Scientific, and they asked me if there's a place for brand in CTV. And my immediate response was absolutely. I really see brand and performance, and I'll answer this question in relation to CTV. I'm sure Patrick will take it to the greater marketing mix. But when I think through brand and performance in connected television, I really see these clear, separate strategies and separate budgets and campaigns that are running. On the brand side, you have all sorts of opportunities, whether that's takeovers, whether it's placement in the Macy's Day Parade, whether we're in football season for all of holiday. Like, are you wanting to be on live sports to just increase that branding opportunity? So I see that more as a reach and frequency play, which I do love to put some measurement behind, just so that you can get a feel for, is branding driving it? Is it driving me purchases? Is it driving me website visits? What does a typical conversion rate look like? But likely you're more so looking at the brand lift side of things, that kind of thing. Much more of a creative strategy on the branding side. And then on the performance side, I'm looking at that in terms of, where am I seeing ROAS? Where am I seeing a better CPA? What does incrementality look like? How do I chase incrementality? Where are those incremental audiences? So these are really, they work harmoniously together. I see them as separate budgets, but they are, separate strategies that you should both learn from. So that's where I would start in terms of brand versus performance in the holiday season.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I have a follow-up question to you on that, and then I'll pass it to you, Patrick. Sorry, I'm going rogue. So do you see those as separate CTV campaigns during the holiday season, or do you think that there is a way for a brand to kind of capitalize on their leverage their resources, I guess, to use CTV for both at the same time?
I like to call that brand formance. I think you can do both at the same time. It's really a matter of, what does that more broad strategy look like? So getting granular in terms of, we call them ad groups, but those are really the underlying strategies. So I'm going after, like I said, live sports here, and I have measurement against it, and then I'm chasing incrementality here, and how does that overlap? And then using all of those learnings to continue to grow the channel until I hit that point of diminishing returns.
Yeah, that makes sense. And also I think a lot of brands are trying to figure out, like, how do I get the most out of my creative, and can I make it do multiple things for me at once? And so I think that's an interesting approach. Patrick, what about you?
Yeah, I loved Ashley's answer. I thought it really covered like a lot of the most important pieces as I start to think through that as well. I think I would like to sort of double down on the idea of like, two things can be true at once, which is that, like, even in like a channel like CTV, you can have like a brand approach and a performance approach. And the nice thing about like CTV is that you actually tactically have that sort of separation that you can sort of use for your targeting. But like, very generally, I think, like, at a company, probably like just promoting a full funnel mindset across the company and then being really, really clear on your expectations for the success metrics of like each of those two things. If you're doing, especially if you're going to be thinking of them separately, I think you should, or if you're intending them to like act as different things, you should also be evaluating as different things as well. Like, so for example, I think a lot of customers like that I've seen sort of like get in their own ways when it comes to the measurement for like a channel efficiency, where they're trying to compare like a campaign that's really just meant to drive awareness and maybe like page views to their website to their other campaigns, which are like more truly like purchase prospecting campaigns, and saying like, hey, one is driving purchases more effectively than the other one's like not worth it or it's a waste of money. And that's one way to interpret it, but it's not necessarily considerate of like what your intention behind running those campaigns were in the first place, right? Like it's actually like if you do have a full funnel sort of view of things, like you understand that there's value in what that awareness driving piece is doing. And so you have sort of a different benchmarking of effectiveness there that you're going to consider when you're analyzing it. And then for the one that is meant to be sort of like actually driving bottom of funnel activity for customers, maybe you're going to have higher expectations in terms of like a CPA or ROAS on those campaigns. But I think multiple situations could work. You just have to sort of prevent your wires from getting crossed internally when you're doing like reporting upward, or when you're sort of like sharing performance more broadly across your company with people who maybe lack some of that more like qualitative context that like Ashley was speaking about.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think we'll kind of speak to that a little bit more when we get to like measuring effectiveness of these campaigns too. Like, I think that is a huge piece of the conversation. Okay, moving on to the next question. We've kind of laid the foundation for CTV, but one of the things that we found in the trend report is that yes, CTV is a top performing channel. 72% of marketers were reporting incremental lift when combining CTV with other channels, though, like social media and display. And 41% of the marketers that were surveyed said that they plan to increase their spending on CTV this year, reflecting on its importance in the cross-channel strategy for driving awareness and conversions. So like, that being said, how should marketers balance CTV with other channels like social media and display advertising to really achieve their maximum impact this holiday season? And Ashley, I'd love your kind of POV first as the CTV expert.
Sure. First of all, I would say that CTV provides incremental reach. So consider that piece first. How is CTV incremental to what I'm doing in search and social? We absolutely see that the inclusion of CTV also rises your conversion rates in search and social. So not only is it incremental, but it's also having that halo effect. Where I'd go from there is understanding how the audiences work together. So are you retargeting your social audience with a CTV ad? Are you retargeting CTV viewers with a display ad? I think you can put all, like, you can create frequency across all of the channels so that you're telling your story in the right way. You can start to build frequency on social, for example, and now start to serve that user a CTV ad, going back to that trust building that I was talking about earlier. And knowing that CTV, like Patrick was saying, really plays a step at every point in the funnel. So yes, it's branding. Yes, it's mid-funnel. It can be lower funnel as well. We certainly believe that. So you need to, that being said, there's never a click or a very trackable impression that happens for your analytics provider. So looking at the synergy across all of them from a data standpoint is also really important.
Yeah, I think that's a great call out. And I think what you were saying kind of to the beginning of your answer, like that's what sets CTV apart from other TV advertising, right? The fact that it is, I mean, it's connected television. And so the way that it can integrate with your other digital campaigns is really seamless. And I think that's why more brands are so interested in CTV, and especially smaller brands that maybe wouldn't have considered like TV as a form of advertising historically. Patrick, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was thinking from like the Rockerbox perspective here. I think the best recommendation is to have a single source of truth for all of your channels. Like if you're going to be running on multiple different um, platforms, like even if you do it really well and effectively in platform, it's sort of like the next step is actually like unifying all of that measurement together. And it's really hard to do that with like 4 or 5 different, let's call them like, uh, what are those like little I Spy glasses? Like you're looking at performance all different ways for like 5 or 6 different channels. It's really hard to reconcile that across each other. So, I mean, I think if you have a single source of truth, something like a Rockerbox, which sort of wrangles all of the cross-channel activities you're doing, I think it makes your life a lot easier. And you know, if we're starting really early as well, ahead of holiday, you'll probably even have conversion data you can review ahead of time to help understand sort of like how your different channels are working together, like how CTV and display and the social touch points might be happening in sequence, or are they working together? Are they working against one another? You know, you might see that some of your CTV campaigns are reaching an incremental audience that you're prospecting on like another channel isn't hitting, or you might see like different tactics on Facebook that's hitting the same part of your funnel as CTV, but like CTV might be doing it better. These are all sort of the things you can use to then sort of like refine your go-to-market strategy.
Yeah, and I think there's also the identity resolution piece there that's really important too, and like the granular visibility that you can get when you have kind of a centralized source of truth for all of these touch points. So, and when you choose partners and providers who partner with each other to have that level of access to information and data, like we do at Rockerbox with TV Scientific. So, yeah, great points. So moving on to the next question, and just a reminder, if you all in the audience have any questions, drop them in the chat and we would love to answer them. I'm going to take a lack of questions as just we are being so thorough in this holiday conversation. But if you have any questions, drop them in, even if they're not entirely on theme with whatever question we're on. We'd love to answer any questions that you all have. So the next question is really going to dive a little bit more into the measurement strategies. I think we just kind of set ourselves up really well for this. So from the trend report, I do think it's like important for us to kind of take a step back and look at like how we are approaching measurement. And in the trend report, we talked a lot about this like unified approach to measurement, combining attribution with MMM, with incrementality testing, to really assess the effectiveness of your CTV and OTT ads. And what we found is that marketers who increase their CTV and OTT spending generate more revenue, even as their ROAS decreases, which really indicated to us that while incrementality may decline, ROI remains positive, and really validates this continued investment in these channels. So with that being said, I'd love, Patrick, to start with you. What are the most effective measurement strategies for holiday campaigns, particularly in channels like CTV and OTT?
Yeah, my recommendation is to gather as many measurement options as you can and use everything at your disposal. Like there's no reason really to like limit yourself when it comes to trying to measure success. I think especially with CTV and OTT, like you have so much flexibility in how you actually deploy these ads, which we've covered in the last couple of slides, that you know, that's a great flexibility that you have, but then it's key to then really have or develop a holistic understanding of how each of them is sort of like actually engaging with your customers. So I think that's really important. I think another piece is like earlier in the year, you might have been testing that validated incremental reach of a CTV campaign, right? You may have other analyses that Ashley was speaking about, like identity resolution. Like you may have cohort analyses that tell you that, you know, X channel brings in a certain quality of customer that might be more desirable for your business than like another channel. Those are all things that you can sort of use to like actually make a difference in terms of like your measurement decisions. And I think figuring out a way to sort of bring all of that together is sort of the key. Like you have attribution, you have testing, you might have other sort of pieces at your disposal as well. But I think the idea is to sort of like use every tool in your toolkit. There really is no like one single one other than measuring it with Rockerbox. But yeah.
Well, and I think you add on top of that, right? Like measuring with Rockerbox means having access to all of these tools at your disposal, right?
Yeah.
I think that is the benefit of having a partner who is going to offer you these various different forms of measurement instead of kind of forcing you into a one size fits all approach. Ashley, what about from your perspective?
I mean, first of all, leaning on a tool and partnership like Rockerbox is fantastic. And Patrick, I like, just as we go through these questions, I'm eager to partner together on a joint client because I think that the insight would just be really fun to do together. But with that being said, first take a step back and think through what were the goals of this campaign? What are the goals of the campaign? Is it a combination, like we were talking about earlier, of brand formance, where there's some branding goals and then there are performance goals. So I think as you use all of the measurement tools at your disposal, it's important to think through what the strategies were and the goals were against what you're measuring. So if these were branding strategies, what tools am I using there? Is it brand lift? Is it simply a website visit metric? Is it simply reach and frequency? And as we get into the goals of other campaigns like incrementality, we love incrementality testing at TV Scientific. We love to partner on that, whether it's via a PSA, via a geo lift. I think those are likely better implemented as you go into the season versus, doing just this geo during holiday. So I'd encourage you think through that, potentially right after your holiday season, right after that ends. And then you have the halo effect. So Ashley, you talked a little bit about how even as incrementality starts to diminish, you're still seeing that return on ad spend. And what that means is you're seeing the halo effect of CTV across your other channels. So using those halo reports, and again, using all of the tools at your disposal. We love to look at things like what spike lift is. So that's just that like immediate before and after the TV ad being shown. That gives you a pretty quick glimpse into, okay, is this driving new visitors, or am I pretty steady before and after? So it's, incrementality, performance, brand. You've got all of it based on what your goal is at the end of the day.
Yeah. No, I think those are great. I think those are great points. And I think there's kind of a lot to be said about measurement, which leads us right into the next question. 60% of the marketers that we surveyed out of that 600 said that they're feeling more pressure than ever before to deliver measurable results this holiday season. And so kind of with that being said, I think that there's this increased pressure on marketers to use data in real time to make changes. So how can marketers use this data from past campaigns and real-time analytics to make agile decisions and optimize their holiday strategies on the fly? And Ashley, we'll start with you.
Yeah, first of all, the past campaigns are really going to set the blueprint and foundation for your holiday strategy. So you know what worked in the past, or you know what worked throughout the year. And if you're new to CTV, that's a different story that I'm happy to have with you. But if you've run this before, you can use all of that data to make an informed strategy as you go into the season. Again, both from a performance standpoint of lifting other channels, what worked, and then from an incrementality standpoint, where did you find your new audience? And I think in terms of holiday season, that's really interesting, like we talked about, because that incremental audience is probably different than your incremental audience throughout the rest of the year. So use the last season to inform that piece of the strategy. And then in terms of real time, partner with someone like TV Scientific that can help give that real-time data back in terms of this is where outcomes are happening, this is where ROAS is happening, so that optimizations can be made against those data points. And then you're on top of that, you're making those real-time decisions. You're saying, oh, this is where I'm finding my audience. This is where it's this inventory, it's this geo, it's this, I'm finding my audience on Roku devices. There's just so many data points at our disposal that you can then make those changes in real time and use your tools at Rockerbox to understand, okay, what was that end result now? Was it incrementality? Was it halo? That kind of thing. So I encourage a combination. And sometimes people don't love to see that where they're finding ROAS is somewhere they really didn't think they would. So keep an open mind as you approach the holiday season, and just listen to those signals in terms of what is and isn't working.
Yeah, that's a great call. And we actually got a question from Victoria that I think, Patrick, you might be well suited to answer. Victoria asked, to what extent are SMBs using real-time analytics across the customer journey?
So in Rockerbox, we do have like 1 day trailing data on customer journey. So in terms of using real-time analytics and customer journey, I'm not sure we're able to like track someone throughout the day as like what they're clicking on, but as it comes in, say they converted today, we would be able to see their full customer journey over the past however long it took for them to sort of like continue through the funnel. What I would say is that sort of using the like historical data you have built up from there is probably pretty helpful in terms of like predicting what the actual real-time activity is going to be. And then also if you do sort of like that early, I keep calling it like early bird marketing, but just like getting out ahead of things early, I think hopefully in real time, we're just looking mostly at like one last pivotal touch point, right? Rather than trying to string something all together, like in the course of a Black Friday, Cyber Monday, sort of that hay is in the barn in terms of the like warming up a customer in terms of starting to make a purchase decision. And now it's just trying to be really laser focused about giving them the right ad on, whatever bottom of funnel channel you're doing, or the right offer in their email inbox to finally sort of like push them over that hump. Yeah.
I do think it's interesting. I do think that the one kind of differentiation here is like SMBs versus like maybe an upper mid-market or an enterprise brand, and like how are they thinking about this differently. But I think that especially in the digital age, and especially with channels like CTV, we are seeing smaller and smaller brands being able to have this impact and being able to advertise and really they have more access to analytics than they've had historically, to be able to understand the customer journey a little bit better. And it's almost like arguably more important for a smaller brand to be leveraging these things in real time than it is for larger brands. Not that it's not important, but I think that real time aspect becomes much more critical for a smaller player who doesn't have room. I think earlier to our conversation, like doesn't have the room to compete with some of these giants in the space. And so they need to be way more agile. They need to be making adjustments on the fly. And I know, Patrick, you probably have more to add to the original question, but Ashley, did you have anything else to add to the SMB portion?
Yeah, I've actually, I've spent a lot of time with our SMB team over the last few months. And I think what can happen is because the budgets are smaller, the impact can get lost. So I would encourage SMBs to think through a strategy that potentially has you focus on a geo or a set of zip codes so that you can influence those real-time analytics more than if it were to be spread across the nation. So how do you use that budget to drive frequency and then see the real-time analytics? And likely when you're looking at those real-time analytics, looking at something higher in the funnel rather than the end of the bottom of the funnel. So is CTV driving website visits? And if it's getting the user to the site, then what's happening? Are you taking that pool of users and now retargeting them with social, for example? So I would, that's where I'd encourage someone to go when it comes to CTV and SMB.
Yeah. Patrick, sorry, I didn't want to take away your answer to the core question here. Is there anything else you wanted to add to how marketers can use data from past campaigns and real-time analytics to make agile decisions?
No, I thought Victoria had a great question. I actually have one more piece to add on that too, which is that like a lot of times like the SMBs won't have the luxury of like some of the more established or like legacy brands that have maybe like a store as well, where like there might also be that like hybrid shopping experience for customers where that's sort of its own can of worms to track, like what people are doing in your actual store. But hopefully having mostly like on digital touch points is going to make that sort of like task easier for like an SMB that's trying to get a good read onto the customer journey. But yeah, more broadly, I think like in terms of the question itself, I think a lot of it just has to go into like mindset more than anything like truly tactical. I think, going into holiday, you're going to use your past learnings throughout the year or maybe in previous holiday seasons to sort of guide your strategic planning for the holiday season. But when you're in the moment, you are relying on real-time data to make tweaks and like changes as you go. Like you're going to be in whichever ads manager and looking at what they're saying and seeing how it's changing throughout the day to say like, okay, this is the tweak or the low light optimization I need to make on my campaign to make it work a little better. But I think the piece that's like easier said than done when it comes to navigating that time is just like being present with that sort of mindset that like you should be multiple, you should be agile, and like you shouldn't actually lean too much on what you thought was going to happen. And instead just remember that like go where the data tells you also. Like you've done that work to sort of position yourself right, but like the really fine adjustments and like tactical movements, you're going to have to sort of like read the tea leaves in the moment. And you don't want to be beholden to like trying to predict the future and then make it happen, because it usually doesn't really work out like that.
Fair enough. Well, I think that wraps us up in terms of the panel questions that we had kind of pre-prepared for the conversation. We'll give everyone a minute or so. If there are any other questions, drop them in the chat. We'd love to answer them. We've got a couple of great experts here on the call between Ashley and Patrick. So if you have any questions about CTV or TV Scientific or Rockerbox, let us know in the chat. And then while we wait to see if any other questions come in, just a reminder that we are going to be sending out the recording from this session so you can access it later, as well as a link to the holiday trend report on the TV Scientific website. So be on the lookout for those. There's a lot of great insights that we didn't cover today in that report as well. So I want to make sure that we get that in your hands as you continue to ramp up into the holiday season. I know that none of you are probably starting your planning right now. Everyone is knee deep in it. By the looks of it, a quarter of you have been doing it all year. So awesome. Okay. Is there a minimum recommended budget for CTV? That's a great question.
Yeah, I mean, at TV Scientific, we don't have minimums, but I love to see someone start with the 25 to 30K budget, because that's enough to get you learnings. If you go lower than that, that runway of getting learnings takes a long time. So I would start there.
Great question. Thank you.
I'd add on to that. I don't think I'm qualified to give any sort of like budget guidance for CTV, but in terms of validating the testing you're doing on that channel, I think you can make the money that you do spend go a lot further by being able to validate something like Rockerbox. It just gives you another layer of like a way to assess it as well. So I think even more bang for your buck there.
Yeah, absolutely. And a follow-up question to that, what does that look like in estimated impressions /APH?
Oh gosh, I think if my math is right, you're getting somewhere in the 1.4 range, give or take. So it really just depends what you're buying. I'd say we see kind of an average of a 20 to 22 CPM. So that's what I quoted is slightly higher. But you're going to find your audience where you find your audience. So that can change based on where you're spending the money. That being said, again, like we go back to a performance standpoint. So while CPMs may be there, is your ROAS backing out? Is your CPA backing out? Are you finding incrementality? That's really how you want to measure whether the cost of it was worth it or not.
Awesome. Great questions. Right. I'm always nervous to cut it off because someone will post a question right as I say, let's go. If you do have any other questions, you can definitely reach out to both the TV Scientific team or the Rockerbox team, whoever's most relevant for the question that you have. Ashley, Patrick, thank you so much for joining us today. This is a wonderful conversation and we're looking forward to many more in the future. I think when we get into CTV, even especially outside of the holiday kind of trend theme, I think there's a lot that we can talk about and how brands can really like understand the impact of CTV as it plays a part in the larger marketing story. So look forward to continuing to have those conversations with you all. Everyone, thank you for joining us today. And like I said, you'll get this recap in your email in just a few minutes. And I hope you all have a great rest of your Thursday. It's almost the weekend. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye, Ashley.